Hello! Welcome again to Hellavie. I'm your host Joe, and today we continue our Let's Read of DC's 52 with issue number 2. Week 2. Day 1 opens with Ralph visiting the vandalized grave of his wife Sue, who I mentioned last week was a darling. The young groundskeeper approaches him and tells him he's a long-time admirer of the elongated man. He explains that Ralph rescued his brother from a kidnapping plot in an amusement park some years ago. Ralph determines that this was a message to him, and that his wife's tombstone was the one place he'd definitely notice it. Now, Ralph's a detective. It's kind of his job to notice things, but I'll let that slide. The boy asks him who'd do that. "It's a mystery," Ralph replies, wiggling his nose. The nose wiggle is kind of his trademark. He wiggles his nose when confronted with a mystery, because he's stretchy. I really hope it's involuntary, though, because this shit's way too heavy to be that playful. Booster's taken Skeets to Dr. Will Magnus, creator of the Metal Men, for repairs after his little memorial meltdown. Only one robot should be melting, and that's Mercury, the only metal man who's liquid at room temperature. Doc Magnus explains that the Metal Men don't really work anymore, as is evidenced by the fact that their parts are kind of strewn about his laboratory. Booster picks up Platinum's head, and Doc Magnus takes it from him and puts it back on the shelf. Look with your eyes, Booster, not with your hands. Booster offers Doc Magnus a ride to Haven, which is an asylum of sorts. Will admits that the only reason he's seen as the father of artificial intelligence is because nobody wants to recognize the guy who actually did it first. A guy locked up in Haven for trying to start a war with robots, who only Dr. Magnus bothers to visit these days. Professor T.O. Morrow, creator of the Red Tornado. Yes, that's really his name. Magnus mentions that the Red Tornado sacrificed himself during the crisis. Morrow isn't exactly surprised. It really wouldn't be the first time. The Red Tornado, I feel compelled to point out, is an air elemental that bound itself to a robot, and therefore just keeps coming back whenever he's blown up. He has an adopted daughter, and a wife. At one point they stuffed his artificial soul into a human body. Professor Morrow believes someone is abducting scientists. Mad scientists specifically. And he has a corkboard covered in newspaper clippings about abductions, including Dr. Sivana's from week 1. "If I were you, I'd watch my step," he warns Will, and advises him to keep taking his meds. On day 3, Montoya is in a booty mood. The Question, however, is in a not respecting people's boundaries mood. He wakes the two up, dangling some frilly underthings and asking, "Who are you?" Montoya, of course, answers with bullets. Her new girlfriend understandably freaks out about the faceless man hovering above them. Question vanishes, leaving a note behind with an address. 520 Kane Street. Yeah, I see what you did there. On day 4, Booster is in Metropolis. Skeets is telling him about an airplane that's about to go down. He flies up, expecting to see a plane approaching from the north. It flies over his head from behind, and he and Skeets scramble to catch it. Booster yells at Skeets for screwing up the details, insisting his little buddy is still busted. Skeets tells him it's just a glitch, and that the airplane and its passengers are all safe and sound, and that's what really counts. Then we see a newspaper from Sydney, Australia, with a headline about another plane that went down with a very similar flight number. 2 pairs of digits are transposed. Montoya is at home the next day, throwing up in her sink. Still hungover, I guess. She reaches for a bottle, hair of the dog, and upon lifting it finds the note from her ex, and the note from the Question. She heads out to find the answer to some questions. She finds the place, an abandoned warehouse, and nothing else. She's about to leave when the Question materializes, seemingly out of nowhere. She swings at him, drawing her gun, and he tosses her easily. Remember when I said last week that the Question was a drug-fueled martial arts shaman? Yeah, he's a really good fighter, like top 5 in the world at this point. He was trained by Richard Dragon, who is unquestionably the best martial artist in the DCU. Now, Montoya's no slouch, but at this point it's Hulk Hogan versus Harry Valdez. Total squash. The Question asks if she tries to shoot everyone she meets, then gives her gun back. He hires her as a private detective. $200 a day plus expenses. Not a bad gig, right? He vanishes again in a puff of smoke. Batman's got nothing on this trick. Batman needs you to turn around. On day 6, we have a series of people taking part in some sort of Kryptonian ceremony. The inference is that this is some sort of memorial for Superboy. Ralph enters the room and confronts Wonder Girl, the now dead Superboy's sort of girlfriend? Teenage romances, who can tell? Anyhow, Ralph confronts Wonder Girl, or Cassie as he calls her, first name basis. He tells her bluntly, "A few days ago someone defaced my wife's gravestone with what I have reason to think was a message from you." Cassie seems taken aback a bit by the accusation. Message? Why would you... Ralph knows his stuff. He knows the trouble she went to reproduce the crystals in this Kryptonian reproduction shrine. He knows about the S insignia on the altar, and not just from Superman. And he knows what it means. On Krypton, it means hope, which is why Superman's parents put it on all of his shit. He was the last hope of Krypton. Ralph reveals the photograph taken back on day 1. Sue's tombstone with an inverted S symbol. Inverted, though, it stands for something else altogether. Resurrection. The issue closes with, of all things, Donna Troy, learning about the history of the DC Universe. Heck of an expository device there. Donna has become aware of the multiverse and the different versions of herself, and has the Harbinger's Orb, which has recorded the history of the multiverse. It shows her the origin of the universe, and then the origin of the antimatter universe, which is full of evil. The normal universe has at its center the planet Oa, ruled over by the Guardians. The antimatter universe has at its center the planet Quard, ruled over by the Quardians. Quardians. The Guardians founded the Green Lantern Corps. Earth became a thing. There's cowboys and fighter pilots and all that fun stuff. And of course Superman. It's DC, so it's got to come back to Superman. And today we have 2. There's the Superman we all know, last son of Krypton, flies over Metropolis, works for the Daily Planet. Then there's another Superman, last son of Krypton, flies above Metropolis, works for the Daily Star, and has started going gray. Completely different. And that's where they leave us. Week 2 brought some new players to the mix. Will Magnus is one to watch for certain, and Wonder Girl's Kryptonian cult is definitely an interesting addition. We have some fun progress on the relationship between Renee Montoya and The Question. Ralph's got some direction in his life, and Booster's line of work is still up in the air, what with Skeet's records seemingly out of date. We get the cliffhanger of, what the hell does this Krypton cult want with Ralph Dibny? And some intrigue in the form of, what's Professor Morrow on about with this kidnapping plot? The issue sets up a few things. Chekhov's gun is on display, but we don't even see it. I'm not going to ruin the surprise. The history of the DCU section at the end is, well, it's very dry for someone who knows the history of the DCU already, of course. It's long-winded and feels unnecessary. 52 is a crossover, this is true, but the only thing it really needs to work is the plot of 52, and maybe Final Crisis just before it. The origins of the universe, collapse of the multiverse, the Quardians? Honestly, they don't even factor into the plot. It's all window dressing. It's worse than window dressing, because it doesn't complement the window at all. It's a big screen TV. It's not bad in and of itself, but while it's going, it sure as heck stops you from looking out the window now, doesn't it? Tune in next week for more 52, for the big multiverse payoff that's surely foretold by Donna Troy, and what is definitely not 343 Guilty Spark. Once again, I'm your host Joe, and thank you for watching.